Counselor Hadley,
Here.
Counselor Whitney. Here. Counselor Borco,
Here.
Counselor Marengoy,
Here.
Counselor Hollick.
Here. Thank you. Just so the audience knows, we're here for both a work session and a business meeting. The first part will be the work session. It will be by far probably the longest portion of it, so please bear with us. We are not going to take public comment during the work session. It's a time for council to learn more about the water project, and that's all. Anything, council, any corrections or additions to the agenda? Okay. Sir. Okay. You are up.
Okay. What's the ending? I have, as always, I like to generate paper, so another. Well, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Is that working for you guys?
Well,
You know,
council.
just,
Well,
yeah,
you should
can
face us.
council hear me? Okay.
Thank you.
So I have a handout to start with, and I want to do a couple things. First, I want to talk a little bit about myself, which is always one of my favorite subjects. And then I want to talk a little bit about the water system. And then what I want to do is just run you folks through this entire project that we're currently finishing up. So you get a little bit of a broad overview of what's been done in the last couple of years. So for starters, as I always say when I come down here, I'm Edward Hodges. I'm a partner, half owner of a company called Curran McLeod up in Portland. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my company just for 2 or 3 minutes so you have an idea of what we do and who we are. So I've been working here quite a while now, almost 15 years. We have 10 employees. We do nothing but municipal work. We do small rural communities all over Oregon and Washington, and we send out to Idaho. The smallest client that I have is the city of Antelope, Oregon, which some of you might be familiar with the Rajneesh a few years ago, and they have 47 people. Our largest client is the city of Canby, Oregon, which I think now is about 12,000 folks. And so, and we specialize particularly in water, wastewater. We also do streets. We do other types of infrastructure, stormwater. We write a lot of municipal law. We look for funding. It's just if you have a problem or an issue as a small community, you know, it involves engineering or funding or planning, we do our best to try and solve it for you. So that's who I am, and that is who Curran McLeod is, your current city engineer. So, and do you have any questions, by the way? Don't hesitate to stop me, because then I can also breathe. To run out of air. It's hot. So, I have a question for all of you, and I'm not in any way trying to come off as flip or something. Do you all know how the water system works in this city?
I do.
In general.
In general.
In general, I do. I don't
Okay.
know.
And I'm sorry, I'm gonna lose my voice if I talk, I
Yeah.
promise I won't. But Ed, while you're talking, would you give us a little background, your educational background and your engineering background?
Oh gosh, okay. I have, education, I'm not proud of it, but I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry. And I also have what's called a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. And I did attend the University of Vermont. I was in their master's program for a year or two, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm gonna get up and work, and that's all I've ever done since. I've been a practicing engineer now for 25 years. I'm licensed as a licensed professional engineer in the state of Oregon, the state of Washington, the state of Idaho, and the state of Vermont. I've had licensure now for, I think, 18 years. And during that time period, I've worked particularly with water on just about any type of project you can imagine. I've built treatment plants, pipelines, pump stations, dams, reservoirs, anything to do with water, I've done it. And I've also had a pretty extensive background in wastewater as well, sort of the same with treatment plants, collection systems, and the like. I spent a lot of time looking for money. That's something I really like to do, as well as the engineering, but the problems are everywhere in all these communities. That's easy to find, the money is the issue, and that's how you make it happen. So that's a little bit more about me and what I like to do. Does that work for you?
Thank you.
Okay. But back to my question, are you all just basically familiar with the water system here? And how it works? If someone says, well, where do you get your water? Where does it go? What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'm not trying to be flip, but, you know, it's kind of start because.
Well, all I know is that the wells and stuff like this, and pumps up in there and comes down, I guess, you know.
Copy that, well, yes,
That's
ma'am.
a great understanding.
I would say I'm confused on which wells we're using, which ones we're not currently using.
Yeah, no, exactly. So if you don't mind, just take a minute and just go over our existing water system today. And so water systems break down into your source, treatment if you need it, conveyance, which is the pipes, how it goes through, pumping and storage. So right now, the source for your water system is the well field up on Salmon Creek. And in that well field are 6 wells. However, of that 6, 2 of them are abandoned and we don't use them at all. We have 4 wells today that provide water to the city. You can turn them on to pump water to your system. And those wells are 1, 2, 4, and 6. The wells that are run the most are 4, which is run continuously, and we're gonna be talking about that later tonight. And well number 2, which is really, that is the workhorse of your system. It's a big 10-inch well, and when things are good, when it's really clicking, it can produce up to 800 gallons a minute. It's a very good production source. So the bottom line is you have these 4 wells, and they pump out through a collection of piping that runs through your city, and they're initially set to pump up to an old steel tank on the west side of town. As well as that tank, they also pump up to a pump station on Oak Street. And that in turn pumps to a very high tank that's up above town, which you folks can see. And so up until this project, the town was fed off of 2 what we call zones. And so anyone who lived below, and Robert, help me out here. Robert is, by the way, I'm sure most of you folks know Robert at Public Works, and he's actually the guy who really knows how this thing works. But anyway, your system essentially in town is fed down through here by that western tank. When we pump water up to it, it comes back in. Folks who live up above are fed by the big 1 million gallon tank that's on top. And then when you have any sort of an emergency or water, you know, gets short, that tank, that 1 million gallon tank up top starts returning water back down the system. And so it keeps you guys at a constant pressure. So you don't, you know, essentially don't know that where water's coming or going. It's just always there. We also now have a 3rd tank. Before we didn't, and that serves the industrial park, and it serves essentially a large part of the town that's located on the south side of Salmon Creek. And to do that, again, you pump water out of the well field, it goes across to a new pump station in the industrial park, and then the pump station kicks it up to the new reservoir. All of these elements talk to each other through a system we call SCADA, which is Supervisory Command Acquisition Data. Is that it?
Data acquisition.
Data acquisition, yeah. And so everything's wired together, and so all these elements feed off of each other. When one tank is short, the other tank will tell the wells to kick on, feed water to it. And that essentially is how your system works right now. Now, in terms of treatment, you're pumping water out of the ground. So the only thing that we do for you folks down here is when the water is pumped out of the ground in the well field, it goes through a series of pipes that are called contact chambers. And prior to going in those pipes, we pump in a little bit of chlorine. And then it takes some time to work its way through them. And that chlorine makes sure that all the bacteria and viruses that could possibly be in the well water is killed before it comes into your system. The concentration of chlorine we pump in is about 1 part per million, so it's not a lot, but it's definitely there. And that, in essence, is your town water system. Is that absolutely clear?
I would
As one.
like to ask, on the tank that's on that side, how old is this old tank you're talking about?
It was built, the west side tank, Councilor Hadley, was built in 1962, and it was
Not the old one.
the old railroad tank.
Well, I'm not talking about the old one, the
Yeah.
one that we put in about 7, 8 years ago.
Oh, that was put in 2007, and it was commissioned, I think, at the end of that year.
Is that the Oak Street one?
No, the Oak
We
Street
call,
one
we
would
call
be,
that the East Reservoir, and it's
Yeah.
up on top of Laurel Butte Road.
Okay.
yeah, but the Oak Street tank would be the old,
The old Oak Street tank was a concrete tank that had been decommissioned.
The railroad
We did
tank.
that about, no, the railroad tank is still standing.
okay.
The concrete tank was decommissioned about 9 years ago. Public Works took that completely out.
Okay, so anyway, that's a brief summary of the existing water system, just so you understand how it works. Now, I'd like to talk just a little bit about the water project that we're currently working on, and we're just about finished. And so, let me give you a little bit of background about this project. It really started actually back in 2004. There was a master plan done by an engineer who I worked under at the time that looked at the existing system in Oakridge. And quite frankly, it was in pretty poor shape. A lot of your pipes were rotting. You had effectively no storage. The wells had a lot of old equipment in them and they didn't work together. There was no SCADA system. For example, at that time, your loss, I think, was close to 50%. So for every gallon you pumped, half a gallon just went out of the pipes. Would you agree with that?
Yes, that's.
Robert, it was kind of a mess, actually. And so the plan looked at, well, what are the things that need to be done first? And it identified that you needed more storage and you need to fix some of your pipes. And then you need to put some new equipment in the well field. So in 2007, there was a big project. I think we spent like $3.2 million total. And we did a couple of things. The old west tank that was built in 1962, that operated for a year and then the bottom hillside dropped out from underneath it. And so we had to pull it, it was pulled out of service and sat for 40 years, I think, or no, 50.
Pretty much its entire life.
Its entire life, yeah.
Until 2007.
Yeah, and it was full of water, but it was effectively useless. And so that tank, we did a geological study and figured out that we just rammed in what are called some mini piles underneath it. We could jack it up and bring it back into service. So we brought that 1 million gallon tank back online, and then we built the new 1 million gallon tank, which is up on top of the hill, which is now called that is the
East
east tank.
Reservoir.
Yeah, the east, I call it Levitt's Reservoir, but, because that's the property owner.
Yeah, Levitt's the one that donated the property.
Yeah, and at the same time, we redid a significant amount of piping in the city to try and cut down the loss. And put in things like generators in the well field and really got the city, back on track. I made your water system, we completely reconfigured the pressure zones and made your water system significantly better.
We went, to add to that, we went from 162,000 gallons of storage to 2 million
2
gallons of
million.
storage.
Yeah.
Which effectively firefighting and during the summer months, increased the amount of water we had in storage for fire suppression.
Yeah. So the problem was is that, so we got a lot of things done with that project, but there were still 2 areas that really needed to be addressed. And one was your source, because you have these wells, and right away I told you that 2 out of your 6 wells are abandoned. The other 4 have different problems. Unfortunately, some of the problems we're going to talk about later, which we didn't even know about then. And we also needed more storage. You guys need more storage up in the industrial park because you had no firefighting capacity for industrial growth up there. And you also have a lot of low pressure zones on that side of town that needed to be, brought up so they wouldn't, you wouldn't have problems with contamination from the water system. So that was really the next project. So in about 2015, Kerr McLeod did a study and we looked at, how were we gonna get this done, where were we gonna get some funds for it, and came up with there was gonna be a 1,000,000-gallon tank up near Dunning Road. It was near the site. There used to be an old city landfill up there, and we're gonna put the tank right near it, if not on top of it, quite frankly, because it'd be a great place for it. And at the same time, we were looking for where can we find a site for a new well. And we came up with a number of options, one being what I always call the Little Texas site, which is up sort of northeast of the city well field, and then also sites over near Highway 58. And that was the major conclusion of the study. The other thing was, at that time, the city, based on this recommendation, the city went out and got a loan and grant package for $2.6 million, okay? So a year later, the city went out for RFQ, on a competitive process, to get an engineer for this project. We responded to that RFQ with a number of engineers, and we were the chosen engineer to do the project. We then entered into a contract with the city, and I think we were given notice to proceed in the fall of 2016. Now, what I want to talk about is money. You folks contracted us the sum of $388,300 to perform engineering services for you on this contract. Of that $388,300, right off the bat, about 115 of it goes to subcontractors. We don't mark up our subcontractors. There's some specialty services that were needed. We needed a hydrogeologist to site the well. We also needed, because the new tank's gonna be up on the hillside, and because there's all these new guidelines for engineering, we need a geotechnical engineer to engineer the tank that we were gonna put up. So these folks cost a lot of money. So we had to pay, that added to the price of the contract. We also needed, I think it was about $40,000 in survey services, because many of the sites were unsurveyed and the property boundaries were undefined, and so that also went to another sub-consultant. We ourselves were probably paid about $224,000, which is a lot of money. I'm not saying it isn't, but that was for the course of the entire project, okay? So we started work in September of 2016, and we finished up the design in the summer of 2017. And there were a couple of changes that occurred over the progress of that design. One is that years ago, this is something I was involved with, there were some folks who bought all the property where the tank currently is over there, who are potentially going to run a quarry at some point. And in the process of buying that property, an agreement was worked out with them that we were going to locate the new tank on the old dump site. Well, something changed during design, and we were told by the property owner that no, we couldn't have the tank there, which was a really good place and easy to get down to the industrial park, but we had to put it at the far north end of the property, which meant that we had to build an access road 3,000 feet long through difficult conditions. We then had to run 1,000 extra feet of transmission pipe back down the hill, and it increased the length of our boring under the Union Pacific Railroad by almost 150 feet. We went from a 50-foot boring to almost a 200-foot boring under the Union Pacific Railroad. That added a significant amount of cash to this project, but unfortunately, they own the land, and we don't, and you guys don't, and so we're kind of stuck with it. Yeah, go right ahead.
So did the city pay for that change, or did the landowner pay for that change?
You guys, unfortunately, that added a lot of cost to the project.
So we
You had
paid
to
for
pay
that
for it.
because they wanted it somewhere else?
Yeah, because they wanted it somewhere else. And there's something and that will lead into something I'm gonna talk about when the bid prices come back to. But yeah, no, it was very frustrating, and it's just unfortunate at the time. Other changes that came out of the design is that we also looked at, we were originally going to upgrade a transmission main, a very old one that comes along Highway 58 as the source of supply to the new tank. And we would have had to redo a pipe across the bridge. There were some other issues that came up. And at that point, we decided it was much more efficient and cost effective to run a pipe under the river. And then we just ran it straight up to the industrial park. And I'm still, at this date, think that was a very good change that was done in the design. Okay, so, and then last but not least in the design, we had 2 test borings that were performed looking for a new well site. One was in the Little Texas site, and that turned out to have results that indicated that there was just not good soils for a well there. The second one was downstream on this side of, well, excuse me, on the north side of Salmon Creek, near the community gardens, and that indicated a promising area for a new well. And so that was the site that was selected to install a new well. And so that was essentially some of the elements that came out of the design that were different from the site. So we went ahead and did the project. The project was essentially broken up into 2 segments for bidding. The well was bid by itself because it's very specialized work, and that was bid in June of 2017, and they started work. It was a contractor out of Washington called Carpenter Drilling, and they started, I think, in August, and then drilled the well until, February was when they finished it. The second and the larger part of the project involved the tank, it involved the transmission main, the line under Salmon Creek, the boring underneath the railroad, the new pump station, new SCADA, etc. That was bid to a consortium of general contractors. And a contractor named Lasky Clifton got the low bid for that, and their bid was in October of 2017. Okay? So the bid prices that came back, Lasky Clifton, their bid was $2,164,000. The bid for the well was approximately $224,000. And right at that point, when the bids came back, we were actually over the amount of money that we had loaned, we got the loan and grant for. And that's why I was mentioning that before. Unfortunately, due to that change that had to be made in the old Hazelbell Quarry site, we've always been, since day one, having to go out and look for some more money on this project. And so, and this has come up a couple times, so I just wanted to let council know why we were kind of starting from behind a bit. Okay, so construction on the big part of the project started November 15th, 2017. And in terms of progress, well, actually, I'll back up. I'll talk about the well first. The well, as I talked to you about, construction ended in February. The well was then developed and tested. At first, we had some issues with the well because it was yielding a lower flow than we anticipated. We wanted to have at least 500 or 600 GPM. It was down around 250. So we came back in and did a sort of high-tech means of what's called development, of when you go in and you push lines out of the well. And that actually was very effective and brought probably 100 gallons a minute more capacity, brought it up to 350 or possibly even 400 over long term, which was, wasn't exactly what we were looking for, but it was a good, solid well for the city. The problem is, unfortunately, none of that really mattered after a while because you were required to do mandatory water quality testing on any new municipal well. We tested that well. It turned out that there was a chlorinated solvent in it called tetrachloroethene, and that solvent was present on the initial testing over what's called the MCL, the maximum contaminant limit, which is the limit that is considered to be healthy or not pose any long-term health risks to drink this compound. We retested it again. It was slightly below that limit, and it was still in the ballpark, and we essentially had to stop working on that well. And we looked at a number of options. The main one was putting in a carbon system called granulated activated carbon to clean this tetrachloroethene out of the well water. And it was so expensive, and also the contractor at that point, there were some other issues which I'll talk about, where I was concerned that we really weren't getting a good price due to bidding. It was at that time where I recommended to the city council that we look at other options, we take this out of the pipe. So that has been removed from the project at this time. Okay? So moving back to the element.
Can I add to that?
Oh, but please add to that.
Just so you all know, well number 7 is not attached to the distribution system. It is not being
Yes.
pumped into our drinking water whatsoever.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
does that mean I get my property back?
No.
Want that?
Unfortunately not.
Okay, moving on to Lassie Clifton's portion of the project. The Reservoir and Access Road, that was started in the, sort of the December of 2017, and they went at it during the winter, but then they ran into some problems with weather. They finally got the access road finished in around May or June, would you say, Robert? That's what it said on my notes. And unfortunately for them, one of the key things that they were responsible for doing was they needed the tank requires a building permit from Lane County. And Lassie Clifton, essentially, the contractor did not get that building permit. In fact, they didn't even start really working on it until May of 2018. They then actually submitted the application to Lane County in June of that year, 2018. The building permit came back in August of 2018, which is about a month before the project was supposed to be over. They then started building the project in August. They built the foundation through August and September. We actually got the tank contractor on site. It's a bolted steel tank. You put it together like a big jigsaw puzzle, essentially, bolt everything together. The tank contractor started in November, and we have just now, what day was it last week when we did the leak test?
I can't, two Fridays ago was when we had it sampled, and
Yeah.
it came back clean and ready for consumption.
Yeah, so about a week. It was finished up about a week ago. Okay. So the Salmon Creek boring, this is this boring that goes underneath the river. It connects the well field to a transmission line that then goes up to the industrial park to a pump station. That started in February. The contractor thought initially that this boring would take 4 weeks. It was not finished until May. They had a very difficult time getting underneath the river. They had a number of equipment problems. And those issues with the river are described in those 2 booklets that I gave you. And you guys, I hope, didn't throw those out. Excellent, yeah. And that, if you read through that, you will have, as thorough knowledge as anyone else of the issues that went on with that boring. So anyway, that finished up in May. And then at that point, the contractor moved on to work on the pump station and the reservoir transmission main. For some reason, they started work in March of 2018 on the pump station, and then they just stopped. And they did not start work again on the pump station in the industrial park until about August. It was early August of 2018. Their electrical equipment, which was the most important part, was the thing we call a motor control center that runs all the pumps and everything is in the pump station. The controls did not show up until December, I think December 12th is when it showed up. The pump station is now completed, it's online, and that's working too. So that part of the project is finished. For the transmission main, there was a transmission main that needed to go in between the industrial park and then up to the tank. It really had 2 principal components. One was the line itself, which is a 10-inch PVC line that comes down from the tank, runs alongside the railroad, and then goes underneath. Going underneath was what we call a cased bore, and it was completed in accordance with all of Union Pacific standards. That is a 24-inch casing with a 10-inch pipe slid underneath. The contractor initially started working on that boring in May of 2018. There were some issues where they felt that the plans did not show the amount that we had done, showed the amount of soil that was present they would have to excavate. They then pulled off and didn't work on it until the end of July. And we said, you gotta get going on this, no matter what you think. And so that was done in July and finished up in early August. So those are, I know this has been a long road I'm going through here, but I'm trying to give you the start, the history of the design, and then some of the issues that occurred during the construction. Those are sort of the main themes of the project elements that occurred. So right now, we have, all of the project is functional. Robert has the industrial park online. The tank is functioning as it should. We have one, small repair, not a repair, but final thing that has to be done where the controls contractor, these are the folks who make sure that all the elements of the system work together. They have to come in and put the tank in, make sure that it integrates well into the existing control system. And as soon as that is done, the contractor will be granted substantial and then what we call final completion of the project, and it'll be ready to go. So it's essentially finished at this time. Any questions?
So up to $250 a day for every day it was like.
Coming to that. I'll talk about that. So what are the project costs to date and some additional issues that are remaining? You know, unfortunately, due to the issues with the well, right now, the project is back at about the cost of the initial, that $2.6 million that you as a city got, the loan and grant. I think we're about 50,000 over. And the city has applied to extend the loan. It's a long-term loan, it's 1% interest for 30 years. And that has been granted, but essentially now, you're coming in exactly in terms of your rates where you were supposed to be. You're not gonna really see a change in rates at this time from this project, if we just stop at this time. So overall, and I have a cost summary, I always bring them down, it's included with this handout. It shows all the costs that I'm aware of the project.
So Ed?
Yes.
You said, so we won't see a change of rate, you won't see a change of rate if we stop at this time. What do you mean by that?
I'll get to that in a second, but I'm not saying, it's just there's some other options now of what the city is potentially gonna have to do moving forward. So right now your costs or your rates are good, and your costs, due to the fact that we took some of the components out involved with that well that didn't work out of the project, it came back to where it was originally estimated. The additional issues remaining with the project are, one, the contractor was supposed to finish on September 15th, and they didn't. So every day after September 15th, until I grant what's called substantial completion, which I've not granted as of yet, but I'm anticipating any day I will, the city is allowed to collect what's called liquidated damages. It's a penalty of $250 a day.